Can you hear me, sis? Okay, you're mute. I can hear you.
Blessings.
Peace, tribe. Peace, peace, peace.
That means I'm offering you truth. Welcome to the Sexual Alchemy webinar series. Today we are going to be sharing all about how to expand your vision through your first eye, which many of you may know as your third eye. I would like to thank everybody who's here with us live. Thank you for your patience. We had a little technical difficulty and thankfully it's been cleared. So we have a really great presentation for you today. May my beautiful sister, Leyanne, go ahead and open the way with our introductions.
Yeah, y'all. Thank you for your patience. I'm hearing an echo. Can you hear that?
I do hear it.
Okay. So we have some forces that have been just trying to get in the way between Nef and I coming on here and speaking truth to power. So thank you for your patience, giving us some grace as we got on. I don't hear the echo anymore. So y'all let us know if there's no echo. I think we're...
Yeah, just so you know, sis, just mute when you're not speaking and I'll do the same just to avoid the echo.
Ashe, yeah. So thank you for joining us. This is a webinar series that we've been doing to really give you a yummy taste into this incredible, potent, transformative retreat that we're doing in February on sexual alchemy on Cabo Verde Islands in Africa. So today last week we did the crown chakra. So we're going through all of the beautiful energy centers, not all of them. We're going through the 7 major ones in our bodies. Last week we did the crown. And then today we're going to go through the third eye, which is such an important energy center, such an important place for us to be talking about. So thank you again for taking all the time to be here and get excited for some yummy stuff. For those that might not know me, quick intro. For those that just might be hopping on for the first time in this webinar. My name is Leyanne. I am a seeker, a truth teller, someone that is just absolutely in love with ascension, liberation, all things power to the people, power within ourselves. And yeah.
Okay, and for those of you tuning in from Cabo Verde, beautiful people, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Leyanne's page, I am Nef. My name is Aust, NeferKa, but you can call me Nef. I am a farmer. I'm a sacred wisdom keeper of ancient African sacred science, a high priestess of Kemetic science, and I'm looking forward to sharing this beautiful ancient wisdom so that we can remember and retrieve this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful nature-inspired symbolism and tradition. And as sis said, we are going to be teaching this live in action for Carnival, the beautiful community ritual that is really diasporic across the diaspora of Africa. We celebrate this Carnival celebration, which is when we have the most potent sexual energy. So our intention is to galvanize this sexual energy and use it to direct it towards this sexual healing. So if you haven't watched the previous episodes that we've done, I do want to recommend that you go back and watch them because the sequencing is very important. As she said, we're giving you a dose of the sexual alchemy medicine. There are actually 12 energy centers that we're going to move through and be teaching in the sexual alchemy classes that we're doing during the retreat. And we're also going to speak a little bit more about what the interactive experiences are going to be, because there's a lot of movement involved. This is an embodied practice, right? It's all about embodying your power. Our sexual energy is our life force. It's our power. So we're really removing the perverted aspects of it by doing this alchemy process. So today we're going to share a few practices with you also. So if you're able to be present, if you're not able to be fully present, definitely return back and come to these practices, because our intention is that you actually integrate these practices into your life and use them to actually practice sexual alchemy to the capacity that you can with the knowledge that we're sharing with you through this free webinar series.
Ashe.
Okay. So,
all right, so let's do some grounding in arriving. which is really, really important. So we can gather ourselves and bring ourselves here. I'm going to get you physically into a posture with a mudra, and then Nef will do a tone and some visualization to bring us fully here. So for those that are watching, you can first begin by putting your left hand at your heart center, horizontally, and then bring your right hand up, extending the index finger, bringing in the rest of the finger and cupping it with the thumb. And this is the Jupiter finger mudra. And what we're doing is we're bringing the thumb, the little self, and we're closing our energy and sealing it in just leaving the Jupiter finger up. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of forward action, of ambition. So we are bringing our left hand to the heart, centering ourselves, bringing ourselves here, and then we're bringing the Jupiter finger out and really pointing it and extending it, welcoming in that expansion of our time together. And while sis is doing, you just hold the pose, and you can also close your eyes or lower your gaze.
Okay. And remember, everything is by invitation, right? So you want to be present, you want to listen, and always trust your spirit. Thank you, Leyanne, for putting us in posture. Remember, posture and these positions are very, very important because they channel certain aspects of the energy field that we may not be conscious of, that are engaged in the subtle realms that we can't necessarily see and sense and feel directly with our two eyes. So this is all about our first eye, returning to that first vision. So I'm going to guide us inside. As our sister said, the index finger is associated with the sacred masculine principle. Many people know that as the energy sphere of Jupiter, which in ancient African science is the energy of Ptah. Ptah is the mound of creation. Ptah is the inception of all creation when it was androgynous, before it takes form. So when we're in our mother's womb, before we even begin to develop our sex organs to determine whether we'll be male or female, there's that point of creation that I want to just bring us back into the womb, right? So as I'm playing this tone, which is the frequency, it's the note A, which is the frequency tone of the first eye or the third eye. So this is our natural frequency that we're synchronizing with. So as I'm playing the tone, just be present and take a moment to actually bring yourself in. Maintain the posture intentionally, right? Don't let that finger get all loose. Intentionally. This is about expansion. And in this posture, remember, you're connecting with your heart's desire, and you're connecting with your inner vision. So I want you to center yourself as you shut your eyes, even if you don't close them all the way. Center yourself here in the prefrontal cortex. We're going to talk about that a bit more in a few, but just center yourself here in the center, in the front of your forehead, in between your two eyes. Concentrate your energy there and see if you can just tune into the vision of your heart's eye and connect that with your first eye. releasing breaths. So I want you to inhale through the nostrils, expand that belly, drop your jaw, and clear it out. Again, at your own pace. We're going to take one more deep inhale, filling up that belly like a balloon. Expand that belly. And on the drop, release. Clearing out anything that doesn't serve us, anything that's stagnant, anything that's old, outworn, that we do not need. Calling in all that we have envisioned that's in our hearts. Ashe. Give thanks. Okay. All right. So thank you for synchronizing with us. I hope that you were able to sense and really actually tap into your first eye. No judgment. We're going to get into the details of what this energy is all about, but definitely take note of what that sensation was for you. For some of us, it's difficult to connect with that vision. Some of us get flooded with a lot of energy. It depends on the state of this energy center for us. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because we're talking about balancing the energy centers so that we can have a clear channel to be able to move and circulate our life force, our sexual energy and power through our body. So it doesn't get stagnated and blocked in any particular area. So we're going to, do you want to do an overview, sis, of what we already went over with the Arit?
Yes,
so,
sure.
Yes, go ahead.
So the chakras. What are the chakras? The easiest way to describe it is the chakra is if you think about the veins that are circulating blood, we have these veins that circulate our energies, and then these energies meet at 7 main places on our bodies, which are energy centers: the crown, the third eye, and it go down. And essentially, it's circulating, like Sis said, your life force, your spirit. It's the flow of life.
Ashe. And then we went over in the last session that the chakras in Medu which is the hieroglyphic language, right? Our ancient symbolic language is Aritu. So when we're talking about all of the chakras collectively, or multiple chakras in plural, it's Aritu. If we're speaking about one chakra, it's an Arit. So today we're talking about the first eye Arit, which most of you know as the third eye. And there's a reason why we call it the first eye. So I wanted to show on the screen here. Let me go ahead and move this out the way. I love this image from 1937 of this beautiful high priestess from the Congo, who obviously is proudly, shining her first eye. I think it's very important that we begin to have more African connections to the symbolism, especially because most of us are being oriented into this, this way of activating our energy through the New Age tradition, which tends to really co-opt and pull from a lot of different traditions, sometimes without proper accreditation. And even some of the other traditions, like, for example, we've been talking a lot about the Eastern traditions and, like in Chinese traditions and Indian traditions, in Native traditions of the Mesoamerican terrain. And sometimes we forget that the root of it all is Mama and Papa Africa, right? So I wanted to show this on the screen just so we could recognize that this energy center is something that, from the ancient world to the modern world, is still actively venerated and activated in African culture and tradition across the spectrum, right? So when we go into the ancient world and we're looking at the Kemetic science, this symbol that you see on the screen here, these are 2 artifacts that I pulled up on the screen here so we can look at. The one on the left is a little bit more detailed. The one on the right is a little less detailed, this is what this symbol is called Ujat. It's also known as the Eye of Heru, also the Greek interpretation, the Eye of Horus, some people may be familiar with. And this symbol is a symbol of the first eye. Now, in our tradition, it's a little more complicated than just one eye. Obviously, there are two eyes. We're looking at the right eye, which is the solar eye. There's also the left eye, which is the lunar eye. We're going to do a little storytelling a little deeper in, and we're going to talk about the mythology that all of this comes from. Essentially, I want to first just lay out that this is a tradition that has been activated, and a lot of people are familiar with like the evil eye and different ways that other traditions and cultures use this eye as symbolism for protection. And this is our ancient African origin of that symbolism. There are even traditions that predate Kemet, because obviously the rise of Kemet or ancient Egypt is really an incline after millennia of Africans traversing not only the continent, but the whole planet. So it is important to recognize that this is a peak. This is a golden age. This is, we're talking about classical African civilization when we're talking about Kemet. So in this symbol that you see here, we're looking at the solar eye. When I say it's the Eye of Heru, in the previous sessions, we briefly touched about the principle of Heru when we showed Smai Tawi, which is the origins of yoga, and we showed the two figures that were tying the knot. One was Heru, which I described as the higher self, and he had the falcon mask on, the priest that was symbolizing Heru. So this is a divine principle. The divine principle of Heru is symbolized by the falcon because the falcon can look the sun directly in the eye. It's a high flying bird. It has precision and accuracy when it's hunting. And all of that is symbolic of what it wants to represent, which is our higher self. It is the part of us that has that keen sense of vision. It is the part of us that has levity, right? When we think about a bird, we're thinking about something that can fly, take flight, and soar. And we're also thinking about a bird that is at the top of the food chain, right? So Heru represents the victor in us. Heru is literally where we get the word hero from, right? Heru is the hero. He's the one who wins, right? And this is a masculine principle. There's a complementary energy, as I told you, to all of the energies. So the feminine version of Heru is Het-Heru, which many people know as Venus in the Roman tradition, or you may know as Hathor, which is the Greek interpretation. Yeah, the Greek interpretation. So Het-Heru literally means the house of Heru, right? So there is no Heru without the house that's holding Heru. So this is why the place of the feminine is always honored. So I wanted to also mention that. Okay. The symbol you see on the screen is really beautiful because it actually already has Heru surrounded by, or the eye of Heru, our solar eye, which was used for protection for sure, but it was really about connecting us with the first eye, with our inner sight. The two feminine principles that you see beside it are the cobra with the crown, which we talked about in the last session, which is Wajet. Wajet is the Kundalini energy that we talked about and connected it directly to the Eastern tradition. This represents the divine feminine. We're going to talk about why exactly that is a little bit in a few. Why the cobra is used to symbolize this fiery passion that we sense and feel as our sexual energy. And then on the left side, we're looking at the vulture. So the vulture that is on the other side of the eye is representing the sacred feminine principle of the mother. This is because the vulture is one of the creatures that if it needs to feed its young and it cannot get any food for its young, it will literally prick itself to feed its young its own blood. So this is showing and symbolizing the selfless love of the mother. So these two principles are really showing and you would also see this on the crown of the Nesubiti or the pharaoh, right? The supreme leader is always representing that he is only as good as his wife and his mother, right? Like it's essentially symbolizing that he is in the position that he's in because his wife and his mother. So he's embodying the mother principle that he was nurtured with and the feminine intuition that is nurturing him, right? So I wanted to say that because I think that that's very important as we're talking about having a more balanced approach to looking at these symbols and deepening our connection to it so that we know how we use these symbols actively. These were used as adornments for protection. These were used as adornments that symbolize things. Usually events could be recorded. Anytime someone was moving up in rank, these things would be gifted. So there were intentions around why these symbols were used and when they were presented to different people.
Since we had a question in the chat around the names of the chakras in Medu Neter.
Okay. Well, as we go through each one, we're going to talk about which energy or which principle governs each energy center. And as I said, there's more than 7. So we're going over them based on the interpretation that we're going through over each one. So the first energy center that we did when we did the crown, we did the universal overarching principle, which is Ma'at, right? And then this one, we're going to go into the symbol of Asar as the principle of the first eye. I did mention, so there's a distinction that I really want to make about this energy, and feel free to tap in if you have anything to add, sis, about this, because the first eye and the crown are very similar energies. It's very easy to kind of conflate the two. So when we seen that cobra in the front of the first eye, I wanted to speak on that because the cobra is something that is symbolizing the pineal gland, right? And what we talked about in the beginning about sexual alchemy beginning, we're starting up top instead of starting from the bottom where people normally do, because the sacred flow of our fluid, right? When we're talking about the chemistry of the body is being released from up here within our central nervous system, and it's traveling down the 33 vertebrae of the spine. And that's where it goes and lands and sits. And our sis Leyanne was describing to us from the Sanskrit tradition how the Kundalini or the cobra was described as a coiled serpent that then has to uncoil and rise back up the spine. So that's the process of sexual alchemy. It's when we have that sacred secretion come down from our brain and rests in the root, right? In the lower energy center. And then we have to work that energy back up. And that's representing the 2 energies now rising up into one. So the reason why it's symbolizing the pineal gland and the first eye is symbolizing the prefrontal cortex is very important. So I just want to touch on that because the first eye, sometimes people think it's associated with the pineal gland. There's an aspect of the symbolism of this eye that literally looks like if you slice the brain in half. We go over this in depth in the sexual alchemy class. So remember, we're just touching briefly on these things, and we want to make sure that we're able to give you a little taste of everything. But if you slice the brain in half, you can literally see the same pattern that is coming out of the eye in that symbolism. So it's literally symbolizing our central nervous system in our brain. I'm not going to get into that in this moment, but the thing that's important to know is the cobra was used because the pineal gland is important for secreting melatonin. It literally adjusts our body chemistry so that we know when to go to sleep and when to wake up. It's primary for our circadian rhythm, which adjusts based on the lighting to know when it is time for us to rest, right? It's our clock, our rhythm, our natural rhythm. And then for women, we also have our infradian rhythm that is another chemical clock that we're working with, right? Because we have our menstrual cycles. So the circadian rhythm that all of us have requires for our body chemistry and our hormones, right? So all of that activity needs to be balanced. The snake, however, and other reptiles and even creatures that have like thin skulls, but the snake in particular and the cobra has 2 holes in the top of its skull that actually allow it to directly absorb the light. And that is what stimulates the pineal gland to secrete the chemical reaction that's necessary to regulate the flow of that animal's life cycle. For us, our pineal gland is so deep within our brain that it doesn't have access to direct light. So we use the symbolism of this creature that has direct access to that light to speak to the specific activation of that particular gland in our brain. Okay, because of the energy that it's secreting and the chemical reaction that it's creating in our body. To not complicate it, that is different from when we're talking about the first eye. That was the crown. Now we're talking about the first eye, which is right here in the front. And this is our prefrontal cortex. Our brain doesn't have any sensory neurons on it. So the reason why this is important is because when we're focusing our attention right here on the one organ that has no sensation, right? Our brain, and this frontal cortex in particular, it's responsible for our accuracy, right? So even when people have injuries, for example, and they injure their prefrontal cortex, their accuracy sharpens, right? This is something they've tested a lot on soldiers, right? But the thing is, once this prefrontal cortex is damaged, it can, even though we can have that, this is responsible for our accuracy, it doesn't allow us to have discernment, right? So you wouldn't be able to determine if you're looking at an enemy or a friend, right? You wouldn't be able to have that discernment. And I'm only using those terms because they've tested this before in the context of battle, right? And they use like video games and see if the people can identify the target and what level of precision that they have to test the injuries to the prefrontal cortex. So this part of the brain having no sensory neurons and us focusing the energy here allows us to become very present with our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our memories. And oftentimes that's going to come up in a very disorganized way, right? So when it comes up in the disorganized way, it's still part of the natural process of allowing those things to surface and become more mindful and more aware of things than you would if your energy was focused, or your attention, I should say, was focused somewhere else. So that's one of the primary keys of activating the first eye. It's a very mindful process. You have to be very intentional about where you're directing your attention so that you can actually activate the principle itself of accuracy, right? Of that first eye, everything I just talked about with the falcon. It's symbolizing a particular aspect of ourselves that we're able to stimulate when we focus on this part of our brain.
Yeah, before we go into my ads, I would love to to ground us into like, what is the third eye for those that might not know, like those that might want a more simple or like easy bite-sized like understanding from what I know from the Eastern tradition. So the third eye, Sis has been saying the first eye, and that's really important because we know it as the third eye, but in truth, it is actually our first eye because it's the spirit eye. It's the all-seeing eye. And if the truth and the reality is we are spirits, then it's our first eye because it's our spirit eye. The third eye chakra in Sanskrit is Ajna, which essentially translates to the two-petaled lotus. So coming from the crown, which is the 1,000-petaled lotus, to the two-petaled lotus. And this essentially is the center of awareness, your intuition, so that higher knowing, that knowing beyond the physical realm, just this like I don't even know how I know this, but I know, like there's just this hint of insight. It's your center of imagination. So just like you can close your eyes, and if I say imagine an apple, you can actually see it, even if you're not seeing it as it's outlined in the physical realm of like the shape and the color. You can just, it's a sense, it's a perception. So the third eye is also connected to perception. How clear, how purified is your perception of the truth of reality, which is another theme of the all-seeing eye, because it's connected to truth, seeing the actual truth outside of perception. in the last theme that it's really important. It's also connected to vision. So this is our, it's our imagination, but also our vision of the future. Your third eye connects you to, like, the imagination, the part of imagination that is envisioning the future. Where will I be in 5 years? What will I create? What do I, it's the visual of the heart desire is where the third eye kind of brings us into. It's also connected to our dream world. So Sis talked about the pineal gland secreting the melatonin, which is what brings us into the dream world. And essentially, that's what the third eye is connected to. It's connected to, that etheric dream world. Something that's important to know about the third eye too, it's because it's the all-seeing eye. It's what allows you to see into the spirit world. So a lot of people can have it depends on when your chakra is balanced and open, it depends on like which gifts might arise through you. And some people are clairvoyant, which they can actually see. They can see spirits, they can see their guides, and there's many other gifts that the third eye opens through sensations that can happen once this is organized. When the third eye is not balanced, this is where it can get a little tricky, because people will often see life in only black and white, right? Like it's almost like a rigid left brain thinking, analytical mind. They can't see the imagination, the creativity, the beyond this world. It can be on the other side. The black and white is when you almost have a shutdown third eye, or you can have an over exaggerated or overactive third eye, which can cause mental imbalances like schizophrenia or multi-personality, where you're seeing a lot, you're perceiving a lot. There's a lot of different realms that you're tapping into, or even that you are creating, that can cause an internal imbalance. So the third eye is really, as you can tell from like the different themes, it's a really important energy center to not only be connected with, but to also have, ways of being that can allow the third eye to be in balance. So you're not only desiring what you want, but also imagining it, seeing it, feeling it, so then you can bring it into the physical realm.
Yeah, thank you so much, sis. Well said. And I would love to just add that not only does it allow us to see the future, it allows us to see beyond the moment. And through the present of coming into that eternal state, we can also see the past, or what we perceive as the past, right? We can tap into all essence of our being, right? That's tapping into the first eye is where you get past life regressions, where you can really see beyond the moment, and you see in that eternal space everything that is, everything that was, everything that ever will be, right? This is also why we have a negative depiction of the serpent and the cobra, right? Because even when you think about the creation story in the Bible, who was it that got Eve to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So it's really speaking about Ma'at as well. So we've introduced Ma'at already, but as Sis said, you want to make sure that this energy center is balanced, because we're not meant to be in fear of this power or fear of this ability that is innate. That's our birthright, right? Like I said, we came in with our first eye before we were even born, right? So when we're developing in our mother's womb, that's the first sense that we have. So it is our birthright. So I don't want us to be afraid of it. It's just a symbolism. The serpent is used in particular to represent the sacred feminine principle, because it's speaking to the movement and the flow of intuition, how it moves. The serpent goes forward, it moves backwards, left, right, it goes up and down, right? So that aspect of movement and the way that it moves is what the ancestors observed, and why it was used to symbolize intuition, right? That type of movement. And the shedding of the skin of the serpent, right? There's so many different layers of the symbolism that make it really important and beautiful. There are also depictions of serpent energies that are that are considered to be like malevolent or evil energies, right? But not the intuition, and not in the way that we've been indoctrinated into through the way that Christianity was Eurocentricized, right? Europeanized, and then brought back to the people, right? And then enforced on the people, right? Through the Crusades and colonialism. So I think that's really important, because I think one of the reasons why a lot of people have a blocked first eye, Arit, is because of fear and programming.
Yes.
Right. But as Sis said, there's also dangers to having imbalances on the other side, because there are people who lean so much into the first eye that they become delusional, because it affects your vision and what you can see. And not everything that you can see, not everything that you see is real. Sometimes you can't believe your lying eyes, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends on what state your energy is in, which is why the balance is so important. Like she said, we can't be too right-brained, but we also can't be too left-brained. And that's why they use the cobra as the symbol, because remember, the direct access to the pineal gland, the only part of the brain that is not mirrored. It's the only part of the brain that is right in the center, and there's one. It's not split. Everything else in the brain is literally mirroring. What's happening on the left side is happening on the right side, right? So I think that that's also something really important, because that means it's centered. That means it's balanced, right? That's the crown. Our access to creation, to the creator, to the divine, that is balanced. And that's meant to flow down and inform the first eye.
Yeah, I think another important part to talk about it, like as far as like the things to note about the third eye, right? If you're in it being connected to power. So it's a source of power, right? To be a human being in these bodies, in these physical bodies, and to walk around and see the worlds beyond this physical realm, that's a power. To be able to envision beyond the now and having it like, which is like literally a birthright imagination. Like God is literally programmed us with the ability to imagine. Like how juicy and like yummy is that we can actually imagine. Now, the other side of that is what happens if you are a person, a physical, a human having this experience with a blocked third eye chakra, and you meet another that has that power unlocked. That's when abuses can happen, right? Because it's an abuse of power. It's like, oh, I see you. Oh, I can see your aura. I can see, oh, yep, which in return can help me see all your traumas if I'm a high, if I'm in high in consciousness. And then that's when abuses happen. And when I'm saying this, I'm even thinking particularly to women that I work with, right? That I have worked with in the past. When I hear about certain abuses, it's like, even though your gut knew, your third eye wasn't fully aware, and then this other person had their eye fully open and was able to manipulate, right? Like change your perception or manipulate your perception in a way that you wasn't clearly seeing the truth, right? So this is it's our center of truth. We have to, at the bare minimum, right? If you're like, I don't know, y'all, about this third eye thing, like you want me to open and start seeing spirits, like I'm good. If you're in there, no shame, like, right? Like I'm from Africa, y'all. Like the voodoo is real, right? The magic is real. So from a little girl, I actually, I had fears around seeing the spiritual realm. I had fears around like, oh no, I remember when I was a kid and I used to see a lot of things, right? That fear is normal and it's okay. But at the bare minimum, if you're going to live on earth, especially through this revolution, through this big change, the Aquarian age and all the wars and the things that are happening that we can't ignore, at the bare minimum, build a relationship with it. Like build a relationship with it. Just be like curious about, okay, if I got a first eye, if my spirit has an eye, just be curious about what it could see. Like just slowly open yourself up to that, because the third eye, even though it's something that's romanticized in the spiritual world, it's something that people often want to go to immediately when they start learning about awakening their consciousness. Oftentimes you need to be rooted before you open, right? Because you can open, it can be too active because the energy is all up here and now it's really chaotic and you're not in the lower chakras, which we'll talk about. And again, with sexual alchemy, we want to be able to move our energy through all the chakras to be a balanced being, to get insight from God, to be able to see beyond, to speak our truth, etc. So at the bare minimum, y'all, like we got to be in relationship with our first eye.
Yeah, and that's part of us being embodying our power, right? We're learning to face our fears, right? That's the courage that we have to have, because there are dangers. I don't encourage anyone to just open their first eye. That's not one of the things for me personally. I don't encourage that because it's very dangerous. Because the reality is, for those who have activated psychic abilities, know that there's a lot more, and a lot of people coming into the space with a lot of ego as well. Like there's a naivety and an ignorance of everything that's present. So there's a lot of illusion that can happen when your first eye opens. You can think you're seeing things that you're not seeing, right? You can be convinced of things that are not real. So rooting yourself, as Sis said, in ma'at, which is truth, right? This is a principle that describes to us how there is order in the universe. What is the truth? How to have that discernment. You can see on the screen, we've showed this image a few times. We're going to show it every time because everything we're talking about is about being in balance, right? We have the judgment scene with the scales of ma'at. You see the principle of discernment on this scene twice. That is the figure, the priest that has the mask of the jackal. That is why we have to make sure that we have discernment when it comes to determining whether something is the truth or not. If that heart is found heavier than that feather, that creature that's half leopard, half crocodile, half all these other creatures known as the Amamit is going to devour the heart of the person that's found wanting, of what is not true. What does that symbolize? It symbolizes when you know you didn't do something right and you know you weren't being honest and you can feel it in your heart, right? And then what do you have to do? Seruj ma'at. You restore ma'at. You have to lighten your heart by being in truth, being in integrity. That's what it represents. When we're out of integrity, we feel that weight in our heart. Our heart gets heavy. And remember what we said about the heaviness. The heaviness creates density, which we need some form of density, but we don't need that much density. Another thing that people don't talk about is the ma'at is symbolized by the feather of the ostrich. The ostrich is the largest bird on our planet, but it does not fly. And I think that that groundedness is something very important that ma'at is meant to describe for us. The truth is very grounded. Sometimes with the spiritual practices, people just go all the way out and we're still here. That's what we came for, is to be human, to be here, to be alive in these bodies. We're not here to escape this reality. We have to be present with it. So ma'at is very important. Balance is very important. So in this judgment scene, because I want to shout out our brother who has been with us, Legacy Jackson, because I've seen all your comments and I did see your questions. So I appreciate the love. And I wanted to clarify to you, because you did ask about the interpretations in the Meru Neter. I want you to know that these interpretations and the wisdom that I'm sharing is an embodied wisdom. I'm sharing this from my experience as a farmer. I was introduced to this legacy through my spiritual father, Baba Heru. And I've gone through self-initiation through connecting with nature. When he gave me the namesake Aust, it was literally because of my connection to the land and to doing the agricultural work and practice. So for me, connecting with the agriculture, which was the premise and the basis of the civilization that we know as Kemet, that is what has allowed me to connect and tap and tune and awaken my own power and my own genetic memory so that I could interpret these energies. So the principle that we're going to call the third eye in Meru Neter is Asar. Okay, so that is the symbol. If you zoom in on that scene, so this is the same thing that was just on the previous side. All the way to the right, you see that symbol of the falcon leading the person who just got judged, right? His heart was found lighter than the feather. So now he's being brought forward to what we would call the Lord of the Underworld, Asar. This is the principle of that's governing the first eye. So one of the things that I think is really important for people to recognize, Asar is shown in two different ways. So I showed two different symbols on the left side. We have the symbol of Asar, the great black, right? Where Ausar is depicted sometimes as completely black. A lot of statues, a lot of paintings and artwork will show Ausar completely black. And then you'll see symbols like the one on the right, where Ausar is the great green and depicted as completely green. This aspect of the sacred masculine energy is one of the most significant principles. This is literally where we get all of the other interpretations from the Western religions of this energy, right? So Ausar and the story of Ausar is the story that I'm going to share, because this is the story that speaks to symbolically what is happening in the sexual alchemy practice. Okay, when Ausar is shown as the great black, he is shown as the principle of death, right? Because he mixes himself also with the principle of death. So I'm going to just show you, I just want to show a few scenes here, because as I'm telling this story, right, this mythology, it's important to recognize that a myth is a little bit different than a story. A myth is symbolizing something beyond something that happened one time. This is something that is reoccurring, that happens all the time in cycles over and over again. So there's many versions of this story. If you've heard this story before, you've probably heard a different version of the story, right? But same premise, but there's different interpretations, because it was expressing something that was happening cosmologically. It was something that was happening in the cosmos, movements, astronomical movements of stars, planets, and the ways that it's interacting with our planet and the way that we perceive it. We started to tell these stories because not only was it happening above us, it was happening below with us. People were embodying these energies. We embody these energies, whether we know it or not. So you see on this screen 3 images, and each image you have a trinity. This is the original trinity, right? So in the Bible, when we look at the trinity of what they say, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the principle of the mother is removed from that. In the ancient tradition, we have the principle of Aust, Ausar, and Het-Heru, which is the mother, the father, and the child. The mother, the father, and the son. The way that the story goes is Ausar, who is the ruler of Kemet, Ausar and Aust, right? They're a couple. They're the rulers of Kemet. They are in a family that's known as the solar family. Remember, this is symbolic. It's spoken as a story, but it's symbolizing something. So they're all siblings, but they're also 2 couples. So you have the principle of life and regeneration, which is Aust and Ausar. So one is active and one is receptive, because these are scientific principles. It's not just that it's masculine or feminine. It's about the way it functions. One pushes, the other pulls, right? One gives, the other receives. So that's life and regeneration, meaning life and the revitalization and regeneration of life, which is what our planet represents, right? It's a regenerative planet, right? Things always come back. You know, we see that every season when we have the shifting of the seasons, and everything dies and then everything comes back to life, right? Depending on where you are on the planet. That's a perfect way to embody it. Now, on the other side, we have the principles of death and decay. The principles of death and decay are their siblings, Nebetet and Set. So we're going to talk about this a little more when Sis talks about the Niyamas, and we're going to talk about how these principles are expressed in other traditions and how we can practically connect to them. But in the story, Aust and Ausar are the first rulers of Kemet. They bring the legacy of farming and gardening back to the people. So the people learn how to sow seeds, and agriculture is brought to the people. Very important, because it shifts the dynamic of the culture from being nomadic, from being hunters and gatherers, to being still, present, in one place, farming, gardening, harvesting, abundance, overflow, surplus. And now the people have abundance and they can stay in one place. This is how we were able to develop all of the sciences. This is how we were able to develop mathematics, astronomy, architecture, all of the great things and the marvels and wonders that we see till this day, standing solid, right? In stone, in the Nile Valley or the Happy Valley. So all of that was built because of agriculture, the first science, right? How we grow with, how we participate and steward the land to provide us with our sustenance. We give so that we can receive, right? That's the principle of Ma'at, reciprocity, giving and receiving in equal measure. So Ausar and Aust teach this to the people, but Set, his brother, is jealous because he has to stay in the desert land, and because he's the principle of death and decay, right? So he's jealous of his brother, kills his brother. And as the story goes, at first he kills him, he tricks him to go into this casket at the party or whatever. Then once he gets into the casket, he closes it shut, throws it into the river, and Aust finds it. She weeps. She's trying to do the rituals to put his bodies back together, but Set already finds her before she can perform these rituals that she wants to do to resurrect her husband. And Set then chops his body up into 14 pieces and scatters it. Her sister Nebetet comes. They mourn. They weep. This is also where you get the story of Mary and Mary Magdalene weeping at Jesus's tomb, right? And all of this is because this is symbolizing that same story, this mythology is where that story comes from. So they find the pieces of his body except for one. They cannot find his phallus, right? His henanum, his erection had to be fashioned. She had to create, Aust, his wife, had to create an erection. Some say out of gold. Sometimes they say it's out of stone, right? She places it over his bandaged body, which is why you usually see Ausar wrapped. You see how you can't really see his legs in these images here? He was wrapped because he was bandaged. The one on the far right, you could see it best because you can see his whole body, because the one on the left, he's kind of kneeling, right? So essentially, she does this ritual over his body. This is depicted in the temple walls. I got to see, it was so beautiful. Her body turns into like a sparrow. She's over him. And this is when you get the first immaculate conception. Because they had not consummated their marriage, right? She had never gotten pregnant by her husband and had a child. So this is where we get the principle of the virgin birth, right? Because they hadn't consummated their marriage, he is then resurrected in spirit, impregnates her, and she gives birth to their son, Het-Heru. So this is the holy family, the mother, the father, and the child, Aust, Ausar, and Het-Heru. Het-Heru then, once he gets old enough, goes and fights his uncle Set to avenge his father's death and to take his proper place at the throne. This is why Het-Heru, which we talked about as the higher self, is the principle of the hero, of the victor, of the higher self. He battles and defeats his uncle, but he doesn't kill him because his mother stops him, because that principle is necessary, right? We need gravity. We would have no balance if there was no death. We need death, right? So this is how Ma'at is maintained. We need life and death. That is the balance of this entire planet. Everything is about the polarities. We have day and night. We have up, down. We have male, female. We have these opposites, these polarities for a reason. And that's what gives us purpose. And it gives balance. And it gives meaning to these things. What would the day be if there was no night, right? So all of that is very important, because in this story and in this mythology, we have a process not only of death, but of rebirth and transformation. That's why sexual alchemy is symbolized by Ausar in the first eye. Because in the first eye, what's happening is it's representing the first aspect of the original vision is the birth, right? I said it's our birthright. We come into form with this first vision, right? This spiritual vision and clarity. But then as we move through the world and we get programmed, we begin our pineal glands begin to calcify because of the pollution and all of the different things that are polluting our minds and our consciousness. And that's when we go into that dark age, right? This is when Ausar is shown as the black, because Ausar as the black represents the soil. You have to put the seed into the soil, and the seed has to decay, right? It literally begins to die so it can be reborn and sprout. That is Ausar as the great green, because he's symbolizing regeneration. He's symbolizing what happens through that process of death and decay. You have new life. Through the process of using waste and manure or food scraps, compost, right? Through the waste, you have fertilizer that then allows new life to be born. That's exactly what this principle represents. So that death process is when we're in the dark, when we have no vision, when we don't remember, right? That amnesia, that veil of amnesia that most of us come through, where we don't remember our past lives. We don't remember anything else. And sometimes we just don't see. We don't have the vision to see beyond our two eyes. And the way that we activate that again is through the rebirth process, which is after that energy flows down the spine through the 33 vertebrae of the spine, that's when you rise it back up to experience that resurrection. That is what it's symbolizing on one layer, this multiple dimensions. So the symbol you see on the screen now, on the right-hand side, you have the Jed. The Jed is the symbol of stability. It represents stability because it represents the backbone of Ausar. So that backbone, that Jed, that is part of our masculine energy that we need, all of us, men and women. We need that principle of Ausar. We embody it every time we embody stability, right? That's what gives us security. That's our inner security. So specifically for females, for women, it's important to recognize when we experience sexual trauma, a lot of times because of that, the way that corrupts us and what it strips away that we have to alchemize and retrieve in terms of our power is it externalizes our sense of security because of that imposition on us, right? Especially if you are abused in a way where it's forced upon you, then that fear and all of the different layers, the guilt, the shame, all of that begins to cripple your backbone, your own masculine energy. So part of the healing process for women in particular is coming into right relationship with your masculine energy through your Jed, through your own stability, and creating that stability and that wholeness within yourself so that you know that you're always safe and secure in yourself. That is part of that work of moving through each of the energy centers and raising that sexual energy back up the spine. For men, it also can just express itself through imbalance. It can be men who allow themselves to be used, right? And sometimes when we're dealing with imbalances in the energy centers, I think Sis had mentioned this before, it can express itself in physical ailment. Things happen in spirit and then they take form in flesh. So for example, for myself, well, I'll probably talk about this in the next session we do, but like I had a hypothyroid condition because of the spiritual blockage that I experienced from my sexual trauma, right? So you can experience that in different ways. So for those of us that it blocks our vision, it can be because of our sense of security that is thrown off balance because of the experience of the trauma that we then have to fix within the mind because the way the trauma changes the way the brain functions. So a lot of the mindfulness practices that we're going to be doing, the meditation practices, the journaling, all of that work is intentionally around working with the parts of the brain. Thankfully, science can now confirm that through neuroplasticity that we can actually modify the brain the same way that the brain was modified by the trauma. We can modify it to heal. So this principle of Ausar is essentially the part of us that becomes self-stabilized, right? Ausar stays in the underworld as lord of the underworld. Het-Heru is the one who reigns above, right? Het-Heru is the one who deals with the conscious reality. That's our higher self dealing with the conscious reality. But we still need our Ausar principle to keep us stabilized and balanced in the physical world or in the underworld, right? So that part of that self-reliance is very significant to how we utilize and engage with our first eye. So Sis is going to share that through one of the principles or some of the principles that she's going to share through yoga. I wanted to just finalize the principle of Ausar by recognizing that this mythology that I'm sharing is very significant because around the time of the winter solstice is when we experience when this story is actually told. That's also why around the winter solstice is when we celebrate holidays such as Christmas, because we're celebrating specifically the birth of the sun, right? The sun is Het-Heru. This is all symbolic. So when you see Ausar and Aust in the sky, which an Ausar's belt, which they know as Orion's belt, there is that alignment that takes place during this particular window of movement on the planet, right? When we're at the winter solstice, where the sun is the furthest south that it's going to be, you have the alignment of the Holy Family, right? For the birth of Het-Heru. That's why I'm saying it's symbolic. It's a story that's being told, but because we embody all of the energies, because we are star stuff, right? We are, everything is everything. So we're not, nothing's separate from us. We've also been, our first eye has also been tainted by the idea that divinity and, you know, all of these principles and things, or the principle of God, creation, is something external to us, or that we need external things in order to connect. When the reality is it's both and, right? We do that through the inner journey and through the embodiment, right? How do you align with the principles of Christ? You embody them. You don't just talk about them or read them in a book, right? You need to embody those principles of Christ, right? And that's what Het-Heru represents. Het-Heru is the Christ consciousness. Het-Heru is the symbol of Jesus, but Jesus is also symbolizing the principle of Ausar as well, because of the death and resurrection piece. So both of those elements of our story were merged to tell the story of Jesus in modern day Christianity. So I just wanted to make sure that we also shared with you where these stories are coming from. So,
Oh, thank you.
thanks.
Thank you for story time. That's not, I was listening to that and I'm like, something about it felt familiar. Like I almost like went into the dream world a little bit. Yeah, that was an interesting feeling. Anyways, thanks so much for sharing that. So we want to talk about something that is really important, specifically connecting back to the third eye. So we shared some potential dangers. I don't like anything fear-based. So we're not putting fear in you. It's your first eye, so you have all the ability to handle all of the things. However, these are like these. I'm going to share with you these specific principles that are known as Niyamas. And before I share that, I wanted to share that you know, as a yogini, I love to decolonize yoga because it's so colonized in the West. Yoga, when I'm talking about yoga, it's beyond just the physical practice that you're often seeing or engaging with. The physical practice so the picture that you see here are the 8 limbs of yoga. So yoga is complex. It's a living, breathing system that is constantly evolving as the yogis and yoginis are adding to it. But essentially, Patanjali, who is one of a really important figure in yoga that wrote the Yoga Sutras, he talks about these 8 limbs of yoga. So to practice yoga, there's 8 limbs. One in particular is known as the Niyamas. And that's kind of what I want to go into today and tie specifically to the third eye, because the Niyamas are essentially self-ethics. There are the things that the disciplines that we need to have to be able to live a well balanced internal life, right? For the third eye to be balanced, for us to be centered in ourselves, to be able to see the truth, to perceive beyond the eye, and to feel connected to what we're seeing in the imagination, in the dream, all these things. There are certain ways that as human beings we need to be behaving. So one of the limbs is yamas, which is how we behave with others. What I'm going to go into particularly tonight is the niyamas, which is the internal behaviors, the ways that you take care of yourself, the way that the disciplines that are necessary to be internally well. Okay, so the first one is Sadhyaya, which is the one that I love probably the most, which essentially means study of self. So the third eye is your first eye, right? It's your spirit eye. And for the spirit eye to be balanced, then you have to be on this journey of self-study. So I'm not talking about books, reading books, which could be part of self-study, but specifically with Sadhyaya, as yogis, we're talking about this internal exploration of self, like a real inquiry of who am I? Like, who am I? What are the behaviors that I get into? Where do I come from? How did I grow up? Just like all these questions about what makes up the self that is you in this lifetime, which then obviously leads to will eventually lead you to like that higher self that we talked about. So it's really important, if you're going to have a balanced life, study of self is fundamental. So yes, you can read books, but having that internal gaze of who am I? What are the behaviors that I engage in? Who am I? You can even ask like who, and this is a question I used to ask myself as a young girl, is who am I beyond this personality? Like, who am I? Like, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Is a really important question to be constantly asking yourself. If you have any questions about this, please ask.
I was going to ask you. So this is essentially knowledge of self, right?
Yes. And it puts it in. Hey, buddy.
Hi, Maru.
Almost done, okay? Okay, love you.
Remember the lion and the witch.
Okay, love you. Self-study is important because once you have kiddos, they mirror you. So you definitely got to be self-studying. So yeah, it's making that into a practice. And with these niyamas, it said that before you even do asanas, before you even do pranayama, before you even get into the other limbs, niyama is like, it's the first limb of yoga. So it's like before you're even getting into physical practices, you need to be internally understanding your mind, internally understanding your spirit, internally understanding yourself.
Okay. Sis, may I share with them like what we were able to do by like synchronizing the niyamas with the principles that we just went over?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So beautifully, Leyanne and I, as she was sharing with me these principles, from which I see them as like responsibility. Like that's how I sense it. And for me, responsibility isn't something that's heavy, right? It can be light as a feather, but it is responsibility. Like, so anyway, I saw that through the principle of through the family of the sun, or the family of Ra, which is the sun, in Meru. So that's what we just talked about in the mythology. So I want to just make sure that people can connect it with what Niyama is, because these are the principles we just talked about. Like when she's talking about, so can you pronounce it for me?
Sadhyaya.
Sadhyaya. Sadhyaya.
So it's
Okay, I love it. Gotta awaken the tongue. So that is the principle of Asar, right? So we just talked about that family. We talked about Asar, we talked about Aust, we talked about Nebetet, we talked about Set, and we talked about Heru. So those are the 5 elements that are exactly the same principles in a different interpretation. So I thought that was really beautiful, because I don't know if anyone has ever made that connection, but I think that, like, based on my understanding, my practice of Kemetic science, as you were sharing all of these, like, that was very clear to me. So I just wanted to make sure that people like could connect what the mythology we were just speaking of, and like how we embody those principles based on this interpretation as well.
Thank you. Oh yeah, so I'll go through each one, and then I'll give space for you to make that connection for folks. So the second one that I also love, maybe I love them all, is Sausha, which essentially translates to cleanliness. Okay, so we talked about these potential imbalances with the third eye, right? Of like seeing spirits, making up potential spirits that you're seeing. And this often can happen when there is impurities, when there is a need of cleanliness. And with Sasha, it goes at all levels of the self. So we're not talking about just the physical space being clean, although that is a part of it, right? Demonic spirits love dirty spaces. They don't like cleanliness. So with this, it's cleaning as a human in this earth realm, wanting to be in alignment with your spirit and have your spirit embody this temple, right? Because, as we're talking about Christianity, I also want to say, like, we respect religion. So we are not doing like a putting aside or a shunning or saying this is not true. We are just given the and. So just like in the Bible, it talks about our bodies being holy, right? And wanting to have our temples clean for the Creator to come into. This is a principle that's connecting to that. It's purity of body and mind. So also in this age of information, what content are you putting in? And then just ensuring that you are giving yourself space and time for purification. That's what Sasha is about, cleanliness and purification. What are you doing to purify your mind? What are you doing to purify your spirit? What are you doing to purify your womb? What are you doing to purify your space, right? Your sexual energy. Purification needs to be a part of the way that you function and that you are as a being. It's a principle of taking care of yourself. So when your third eye is open, that you are seeing the most brightest, clearest truth in perception of what is in front of you and what you're living. Another principle that is really important for the West, I can speak about other places, in some ways, if I think about Cabo Verde and in my folks, they experience this too, but specifically in the West, Santosha, which is contentment, inner happiness, like making it a practice to like be content with what you have, like not seeking to be great and looking for all these external validations, but practicing like, what would it mean if I was just happy right now? Like, what would it mean? Like, how would I act? Like, what are the thoughts that I would have if I was just happy with the lifestyle that I was in right now, with the work that I was in, with the partner that I was in, without seeking for more, wanting more, always like outside of yourself? What would happen if you were present in this inner joy of, I am content. I'm content with what I have. I'm content with this life. So Sadhyaya, self-study, constantly studying yourself. Sasha, purification, purifying, cleanliness. Santosha, which is contentment and inner happiness.
So that's the Holy Family. That was what we just went over. Aust, Ausar, and Het-Heru. Because, and the order that you said it too is really beautiful, because the study of self is Ausar, purification is Aust, and contentment is Het-Heru. Because after defeating his uncle, right, he takes his position and then he's content, right? Like he creates that reality of like what happens when we have ourselves stabilized in a whole place and our ego is in its proper place, right? Because we need our ego, we need it to survive, it protects us, it serves its beautiful purpose, and that's beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
It's so important, because that's exactly what this specific like niyama is. It's about having a clear mind, right? It's like having a clear mind, because when you're not in contentment, your minds are your intentions, your ideas, your thoughts are not pure. You're almost like all over the place, like you're angry or you're irritated or you're frustrated. So that's interesting, because it's like no vengeance. You're just present here in the now. The fourth niyama that I want to talk about is tapas, which is discipline, right? So in the tapas is interesting, because there's so many different ways of describing it, and the way that I've internalized it and the way that I practice it is like making it kind of connects to santosha of like content. So you're practicing being content. It's the opposite of that. It's using the inner fire for constant growth. It's using like knowing that sometimes I have to push myself more. Sometimes I have to devote to a practice, because when I devote to it, the fire is what purifies, and that fire is what purifies and will bring me growth. So the tapas is about discipline. It's about devotion, right? Because discipline is an act of devotion. It's from the heart. It's like, I will do this. I will continue to come back here over and over again and do this certain practice, or there's certain thing, because the fire will bring purification. It will bring something new. It's knowing that you have to practice discipline, because it's going to translate into a disciplined mind, which will disciplined thoughts will then will lead and influence your disciplined words, which then will lead to your disciplined actions. Discipline, it's important to practice. And then the last one is, which connects right to that, which is Isvara Pratihara, which is all about faith, surrendering to the great beyond, surrendering to God. as much as the ego wants to cling on to like, I know, and potentially there's nothing beyond, the truth of it is we have a creator. And the more the mind can be in I trust, Ishvara is about like, I trust whatever is happening in my life. I trust that there is a greater power that is in control of this. I trust everything is working for me. Everything that's happening is happening for me. So again, there's no fear. So, right. So if the third eye is open and you are seeing something, or you're astral projecting, if in that moment you're in the Ishvara because you've practiced it over and over again, then you're like, okay, yeah, I'm astral projecting. I trust that God is in control of this. I trust that, even with, demonic forces that essentially don't have power, they only have the power that we give them, which is why often we're creating them, because we're giving them our power. Even with them, if we are in the place of Ishvara, of like faith and trust, and we don't give them that power. It's an important principle when you're thinking about being in alignment, in being ethical, in taking care of yourself. These 5 niyamas are crucial as a practice. And again, Patanjali talks about these 5 niyamas being more like vital for a yogi before moving on to asana, which is what people often see as yoga, which is a very watered down version that the West is highlighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's so important, what you were sharing about the space people move through. The protection that we have is in possessing ourselves, right? Because that is a very real reality, which to me is like, just to address the truth of it, and not, that doesn't mean we have to be in fear. The goal is to possess ourselves. So through sexual alchemy, when we're doing that work of making sure that we're retrieving our power, right? Because the way that these demonic forces, or these entities, these thought forms, whatever dimension we want to look at them as, they attach themselves to us, they tether to the trauma, to the wounding. So when we heal that space and we fill it, right, and we're full in ourselves, instead of trying to escape ourselves, right? Because sometimes when people are doing, if you're smoking weed or whatever it may be, right, there's aspects of you through that levity that you're releasing apart. You're elevating out of your body. So it is important to recognize that through any practice that creates lightness, that it relieves us from a part of our body that we need to make sure that we then return to, right? And are content and whole and full in. Mm-hmm. So I love what Sis was saying, because even when we go through those experiences, if people are going through those experiences because of trauma that needs to be addressed and healed, to have the courage to face that, yes. Because even that darkness is a reflection of you, right? So that's an important part of the healing process, is going through that space. And that's why it's great to have a guide, or guides in our case, especially with the retreat that we're doing, because we're going to move into those spaces together with courage, with light, with full illumination. So we really comprehend with deep consciousness what exactly we're moving through and how we have the power to transform and alchemize it. So when she's talking about the tapas and the Ishwar, how do you say that one?
Ishwar, the Ishwar Pranadhana.
So those are the principles of Set and Nebetet, which I was telling you all is the principles of death and decay. None of us are going to make it out of here alive. We are all going to die. And even in that sense, our spirit is eternal and is going to continue on, right? So that expression of just knowing that death is certain in itself is the beauty of life, right? If we weren't going to die, how would we even appreciate every breath that we take, in this entire experience? How can we be fully present? That's the expression of the humanity of our being here. The gift, the present is the gift, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important to just recognize that we need both. So even with all of these disciplines or niyamas or this solar family, it all still has to be in balance. For example, with Nebetet, which is like the principle of surrender, right? That's that part of the feminine part of death, is the part that just releases, right? It surrenders, right? So I think it's important to recognize that like that as an example, like could be imbalanced as well. You have expressions of dark feminine energy that can be abusive, that can be imbalanced. And then you have an aspect of it that's just neutral. So when we talk about Ma'at, we're speaking about it overall, right? You can purify yourself too much, right? There is such thing as going overboard with some of these things, right? There's a reason why there's a disorder. What's that disorder when people are too, the one where people want to clean too much, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Right. So there's ways that we can be excessive in anything. So that's why we return to Ma'at as we go through each of the energy centers. Because anytime we're dealing with anything, we want to deal with it in moderation. You want to synthesize and know what's appropriate. That's why you have to be present with yourself. And like I said, this is why it's great to have a guide so you can be supported in that process, which is what we want you to experience with us in February. So the Sexual Alchemy Retreat is on February 28th to March 7th. This is going to be a beautiful experience. It's very intimate. So for the people who are interested in signing up, I'm going to go ahead and put on the screen, and you can click the link in the description as well to visit sexualalchemy.com, where you can get the information about the retreat and the things that you are able to experience. We're going to highlight a few of those here. So Leyanne, can you share with them a bit about the retreat?
Yeah, so it's 7 days, y'all, which means like we're gonna be diving deep, right? Some retreats are 3 days, some retreats are 1 day. Like we're doing 7 days, and we're not like in a really important key place is the location. So we're taking you to Mama Africa. Okay, we're taking you all the way back to your mother so you can plug in, so you can get your umbilical cord and be like, I am ready for this power. Plug into the land, right? Because the land itself is alive, vibrating. And just the fact that we are taking you to Mama Africa, that in itself is already transformative, right? To be able to plant your feet on the land, to feel the pulsating of Africa on your bare feet and say, Mama, I'm home. So it's 7 days of deep healing. So like Sis said, we're going to start by facing the stuff. But we're going to start by like facing like what are the things that are in the way? What are the things that are hooking our life force? What are the things that has our life force coiled up, not allowing it to move up through these centers so my third eye could be open? Well, we have practices, physical practices. I personally will be leading you through a lot of somatic practices, right? All the other limbs of yoga, the pranayama, the asana. So you can move, so you can shake, so you can, all the things that have you shackled, we gonna unshackle it. And then and then we'll descend to the fun, because you can't talk about sexual alchemy without the fun, right? The heart, the pleasures. So then we have excursions like swimming with the turtles, which we talked about last time. But I just want to emphasize how beautiful this is. Like, and I'm just feeling today like to emphasize on the beauty of like these elements that's beyond like Nef and I, right? You have these really, really powerful sisters that are in sacred sisterhood with each other, right? That's going to be transmitting that, and have worked through many things, right? Including their own sexual traumas. So we see you, we with you, like literally, right? This medicine, the only reason why we can birth it is because we have given it to ourselves first. Not only do you have that, but that's the minimal compared to Mama Nature, and then like medicine of the land, including the turtle in the water. So you're going to get into the Atlantic Ocean, which has so much significance, right? The water. And you're going to be swimming with these beautiful animals, these beautiful creatures, turtles, as you surrender, as you practice surrender. So all the Niyamas we're talking about is going to be like in practice, right? This is about embodying your power. So we're going to be doing so many practice like meditation, somatic movement, like I mentioned, to bring it into like, there's a lot of information we're giving. Like this retreat is about embodiment. So it's going to be, we have some sexual alchemy classes, which is going to be some information because we need that information. But the vocal point of this is the embodiment piece, which is really the practicing, the actual like the process of alchemy, doing the alchemy to be able to when you come back or return back home to wherever you're going to return to, you bring all that power with you to create the life that we want. Because y'all, we are in the Aquarian age. I've been saying this since like 2016. I'm like, yo, I don't know when we're going to reach it. And it's crazy to be like on here and be like, we are in it. Okay. The information is the technology, like all of the energy of the Aquarian is here. So, and then you get, and this is so really important. This is a portal, right? So we've opened a portal that we're allowing, that we're not allowing,
inviting,
gracefully inviting you to, that we feel privileged to be opening and holding, really privileged, honored to say yes to the assignment of open it. But it's a portal for you to come into, embody a power, and then bring it back to wherever you came from. So then you can create the life that you need, the life that we need. You're going to create, when you create the life that you desire, the life that you want, then you are creating a life that we want and that we need. And we need more of that. As you can tell by the state of the world. But the beauty of it is the universe is in our favor. The stars, the galaxies are in our favor. Like, look at this.
Yeah. And I feel like when you're talking about the technology, like I think the technology, I can't even say I'm the most excited about anything because all of it is great. Like I was going to say, and the highlight is Carnival, but it's like, it doesn't even feel like it's the highlight, but it is, because that's the greater ritual. Ritual and ceremony is our ancient technology. Yes. That's how we make shit happen. Yes. That's how we move mountains.
Yes.
Literally. Okay. Yes. We can transform. We can move, we can call in the forces of nature when we are in alignment and when we are in ceremony and when we are in ritual. And we're intentionally calling this ritual because we're saying enough is enough.
Yes.
I don't want nobody touching our children. I don't want no more of this cycling over and over again, which is why we're targeting the root.
Yes.
Right? We're uprooting that trauma from the source, so that we stop recycling this. And each of us is a grain of sand on that beach. Each of us is a drop of water in this ocean of transformation. So we need you. We need every single one who chooses to heal is transforming it. We're having an intercellular transformation.
Yes.
Of our planet.
Because the truth of it is, y'all, if you are living on Earth right now, if you're a human being living on Earth right now, you have experienced sexual abuse and trauma. That's a fact. Because of the way that the sexual energy is so perverted. This is why, like, again, it's saying we're going to the core, because this is where our life force is. It's our ability to create. It's what everything has come from. It's the great mystery that we are also curious about. In the perversion that starts at such a young age, right? We have, traumas, and you can watch our first live that we went a little bit deeper into it, and I don't want to do it here, but the truth of it is, if you are watching this, the replay, you on live right now, you have experienced some kind of trauma, and trauma is simply too much too fast. So as a young kid, it could just be like, you're 8 years old and you pick up the laptop and all of a sudden uncle has porn on, and then you watch porn, and then it's too much too fast. Your consciousness wasn't ready to see that kind of the sexual act in that way, because most of the time in porn it's perverted. So then you got into that perversion. It was too much too fast. You didn't have the ability to have clear seeing to really decide, do I want to be turned on by that? Is that something I actually want? Because at a young age, you don't have the discernment yet.
So, and that's very direct. I think it's also important for people to know it could be as subtle as that uncle that held your hand a little too long.
Yes. And because it creates contraction. And this is what we're freeing. We're freeing our life force from contraction. So trauma too much too fast, and contraction of that energy. We're tight. And the sexual alchemy work is about softening, releasing, letting go, and discharging of this energy that is not ours, that is not of our origin. It's not who we are. We're divine. We're light. We literally, through our words, we create. We have so many gifts as human beings to speak, to manifest, but we can't do that when we're contracted,
Yeah, and the opposite of that contraction is expansion. So that's where it's teaching you how to expand your vision.
So sign up. That's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. We're basically saying go on sexualalchemy.com and apply for the retreat. And let's like really do the work. Like we want to hold you. I want to like hold you. I want to like hear all your stories. I want to be present with you. I want to like support you in with energy work. Like I want to be with you in supporting you and releasing what you want to release to. And I know my sis does too.
Yes. Sis, too fast though, because I realized we didn't get to do our EFT practice.
I know. I thought about it, but when you went into it, I was like, all right, we can give him another time. I don't,
Okay.
I want to, we got a lot, y'all. We want to give you so much. And we've been on here for an hour and a half. So we want to be courteous of your third eye consciousness.
We're giving you a lot, and this is just a dose. That's really need you for the 7 days. Like I'm really excited about doing the actual sexual alchemy classes, like having the full presentations out, really going there, answering all your questions. We're going into the mystery system, the stuff that I cannot share online. But if you make that choice, you make that commitment to be present and you're there, you're getting it all. And you're gonna get a full download. So I'm excited about that. We have a beautiful space where we're going to be doing the sexual alchemy classes. It's actually on the visual here in the top left corner where you see the 3 pyramid structures. We're going to be right in the center, right on the ocean, and it's going to be so beautiful. And we're going to be able to share the knowledge and the wisdom more in depth. And then sister was talking about like connecting with the land, and I wanted to speak about the food because I'm most excited about the food, because one of the ways that we awaken ourselves, because remember, everything we're talking about is chemistry. When we're talking about Ausar, we're talking about the chemistry of the melatonin secreting from the pineal gland to bring us into our sleep state, and all of this different the hormones, all of the fire, the stimulation, right? That erotic energy that we're sensing, it's all chemical. Right? So it's all chemical, and our bodies need fuel. So the chemicals that we're putting into our body, or the chemicals that we're being exposed to, the synthetic artificial chemicals, that purification process that sis mentioned. Yeah, so the foods, the things we're going to be eating, we're going to have some special cocktails, some signature cocktails, which are actually going to be
cocktails or mocktails.
Well, I guess they would be mocktails.
Okay. Just letting y'all know, okay? You know what I'm saying? We all adults. And we're purifying.
Drinks. Yes, some signature drinks. Teas, tonics. That's what I'm talking about. But they're going to be purifying. They're going to be cleansing. They're going to be alkalizing the body. They're going to be maximizing our connection to everything that we're moving through. So I'm excited about the food. We have 2 great chefs that we're going to be having that are going to be preparing our meals, 2 beautiful African sisters. And we're going to have food that we're locally sourcing from the farms that are going to be super solar charged and activated. So all of that is very important, because to be honest with you, a lot of the food that most of us are exposed to, because of all the chemicals that the food is exposed to, and then on top of that, just the mineral deficiency, right? The nutrient deficiency of a lot of the foods, going back to that rich, fertile, volcanic soil is going to be very powerful. So I'm excited about that, and even providing some of the food from our farm. So I'm really excited about that. And then finally, we're going to be experiencing 2 nights, 2 beautiful nights of lots of fun and festivities, VIP Carnival experience. We're going to watch the beautiful parades, be a part of the beautiful competition, and see exactly what the artists and the people who are part of the Carnival are able to create with the theme for this year. So it's going to be really beautiful.
Yeah, seeing women in their full sensual and sexual power. Okay, these women be sexy, they be open and flaunting. They're like, yeah, this is the power we have, and it's going to be powerful to witness that, to feel that, and receive that through our bodies.
Yeah, and we're going to give you the space to do that. We're going to create the space to like purify, coming back to the power of ceremony and ritual. It really is a gift to be able to come to the space that Leyanne and I are holding. Yes, we're talking about the things that are beyond us, but I'm going to be tooting our horn for a second, because the fact of the matter is we're very powerful sisters. And we're going to make sure when we open the way and we clear out your shit, that shit is done.
With my red flag.
Ain't no coming back for that.
You will not be the same.
Not
You
be
will be transformed.
I guarantee you.
That is a guarantee. We need a guarantee stamp on the website. Guaranteed.
Transformation guaranteed. Okay. So we're going to be doing some powerful ceremonies and rituals, including the Carnival. We're going to do our sacred fire. We're going to be doing our adornment ceremony afterwards to make sure that you fully come out into your full expression of that power. And then we're going to nurture you a bit after you leave to make sure you integrate it all.
And if you have questions too, like, please know that if you go on the website, there's also an option to book a chemistry call. And that's an opportunity to have a conversation with Nef and I. We know, it's to some people, it can feel like, oh, like I feel it. I want it. Like, oh my God, absolutely. This is everything that I've desired. And what do you mean? I'm going all the way to Africa? I don't know nobody there. Is it safe? Oh yeah, you gotta have a passport. There could be fears that come up through that, and we would love to support you in just talking it over, just saying like, okay, these things are coming up, or these are the thoughts you have, or whatever it is. We could chop it up, we could vibe out. We would love to talk to you through a chemistry call. And if you're ready, apply. If not, if you want to talk, chemistry call would be the next way. Or join us again for more, ascension, more information next week. Thursday, we are moving to, I love this.
Yes, I know. I was going to say, I don't want to say anything, but I love the throat. Because your sis loves to talk. Not just talk, sing, and just express. So we're going to be talking about the full energy of expression. Comes through our throat energy center. I think it's also important for people to know, like, Leyanne and I are both Criollas, right? We're from Cabo Verde. We're taking back to the land. I'm currently living in CV. Leyanne was actually born in CV, right? So like it's a really beautiful like synergy between us that I love, and that I want people to like actually be able to experience with us. So again, book the chemistry call if you have some questions, right? That's on the website, and then the application is there if you're ready and you want to apply, because once the slots are filled, that's it until the next revolution, next time around. All right. So we want to make sure that if you're interested, that you're, staking claim to your position and your place, and we're going to reserve your space. So apply. And as she said, we're going to be here on, yes, this does have the correct date. Yes, January 2nd, Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern. And that's when we're going to be dealing with the throat energy center. All right.
Okay. And just to plug a little thing so you can come up for the ladies. Okay, I don't know if I should share this. I'm going to share it. We talk about sexual alchemy. We're going to be all out. If we're talking about pleasures of the throat, ladies, did y'all know that you could have a throat orgasm? Like, we are just these instruments of pleasure. Please join us. Let's have a conversation on the throat. Let's unblock it and enjoy ourselves.
Yes, so we look forward to seeing you on Thursday, and hope you have a beautiful night wherever you are. If you're not, if you have to travel light, and have a beautiful night.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, those that have been hanging with us. We appreciate it. We love you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Power.
Wow.
Peace.